Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material articles, research papers, your notes, and distill the absolute most fascinating, useful, and sometimes infuriating knowledge from it.
And our mission today is, well, it's arguably one of the most humanistic deep dives we've ever taken.
I think so. Today we are navigating the hidden language of subtext in spoken English.
Right. And this is a mission that goes far beyond just, knowing your grammar or having a solid vocabulary. We're moving into the realm of human psychology, social codes, and nonverbal communication.
Exactly. For the learner who wants to move past just being understood and actually master real-world English, this is it.
This is the final frontier. It's about recognizing that every single interaction, every greeting, every chat, every debate, it's a tapestry. It's woven with sound, with gesture, with history, and with so much more than just the literal words themselves.
Oh, I love that image, a tapestry. Because if you really think about it, if we only relied on literal meaning, human interaction would be, well, incredibly poor.
Aggressive even.
And frankly, just inefficient. Subtext is that layer of meaning that's not spoken out loud. It's what speakers mean or feel or intend when they choose the words they use.
It's that gap, isn't it? That intentional or sometimes unintentional gap between the text and the reality.
Yes.
And we can jump right into that gap with the classic example, the one that really drives this point home.
Let's do it.
So imagine you're in a meeting or maybe at a friend's house and someone says with this, noticeable stiffness in their voice, it's a bit chilly in here, isn't it?
Right. On the surface, if you were a robot processing this, the literal text is just a simple observation, a collaborative observation about the temperature.
Mm-hmm.
The person is confirming a shared reality. You could just answer affirmative, the temperature is low, and, move on.
But if you respond only to the literal text, you've completely missed the entire communication event. You've basically failed the conversational contract.
Exactly. The subtext here is almost certainly a polite, disguised request. It's, please, for the love of all that is holy, close the window.
Or, could someone please turn up the heat because I am freezing?
Yes. It's an expression of discomfort disguised as a statement of fact. And that is the engine that drives so much sophisticated communication, especially in English-speaking cultures where, let's face it, aggressive, outright directness is often seen as, well, breaching the peace.
And what's so critical for the learner to understand right away is that this one example introduces two critical facets of subtext. First, subtext is inherently social. It allows for tact, for politeness, for social grace.
We're prioritizing someone else's comfort or our own need to appear polite over pure efficiency.
And second, it requires the listener to share context, or at the very least be attuned to the speaker's emotional state, their tone, their body language, just to decipher the true message.
Absolutely. If the person saying it's chilly is wearing a heavy sweater and sitting right by a draft, the subtext is, pretty easy to decode.
But if they're in a t-shirt and standing next to the thermostat, the subtext might be confusing. It might force you to ask a clarifying question. Context just matters more than the words themselves.
So, in this deep dive, we're going to explore what subtext is in detail, why mastering it is so crucial for professional success and for building strong relationships, how it manifests through tone, body language, even digital cues.
And then, crucially, we'll give you some actionable, practical strategies for sharpening your subtext radar. Because if you can't read between the lines, you really can't fully engage with the human world around you.
Let's start then by grounding ourselves in the specifics. We need a really robust definition, not just an anecdote. Subtext is the underlying meaning, the emotion, or the thought process hiding behind the explicit words.
It is quite literally the layer beneath the text. It provides the context for that superficial statement.
And this is where the complexity comes in, right?
Well, yeah.
Because that underlying meaning can be communicated either consciously or unconsciously.
Exactly. When it's conscious, the speaker is using it strategically. They know they're masking a true demand or an opinion for a specific reason. Maybe it's tact or a negotiation strategy or just adhering to a social tradition. They are intentionally choosing to be indirect.
You just have to think of a politician or a diplomat. I mean, they are masters of conscious subtext. They rarely say, I disagree with you entirely and I think your policy is destructive.
No, of course not.
Instead, they might say something like, that presents a challenging perspective that deserves further study. They're actively using subtext to avoid, a diplomatic incident while still communicating clear disapproval to anyone who's actually paying attention.
But so often, subtext is entirely unconscious. It just sort of bubbles up because of emotional tension that the person hasn't fully processed. Maybe it's deep cultural programming that discourages direct confrontation, or simply inherent physical and social codes leaking through.
Like a stressed colleague saying, "I'm not bothered by the deadline," but their foot is capping a mile a minute.
Yes, and their rate of speech is really rapid. That gives away the underlying anxiety they might not even be aware they're expressing. The subtext is a physiological truth escaping the conscious lie.
Right, so it's not always high-stakes diplomacy or manipulation. Sometimes it's just raw human emotion stress, excitement, fear leaking out around the edges of these carefully chosen words. And if you miss that leak, you've missed the person's true internal state.
And our sources helpfully categorize this hidden language. They break it down into 4 essential functions of subtext. These functions clarify why we resort to using this hidden layer in the first place, instead of just stating our truth directly.
The first one, and you could argue it's the most vital for social cohesion, is politeness or softening a request. We use subtext just to maintain harmony. We avoid saying, "Pass me the salt now," because that's an imperative. It's a direct command that suggests a hierarchy, and it violates that principle of social equality in the moment.
Instead, we frame the demand with the softening subtext of a query. Would you mind passing the salt? Or even more casually, just salt.
And if you dissect to that classic phrase, "Would you mind passing the salt?" literally, it's asking if the physical act of passing salt would cause you emotional discomfort.
Right, which is absurd. If you took that literally, you'd have to seriously ponder your feelings about salt delivery.
But the subtext is crystal clear. It's a request framed as a polite, optional question. It allows the other person the dignity of feeling like they have a choice, even though everyone knows the expectation is compliance. The subtext masks the demand, allowing the interaction to proceed smoothly.
And this is a really deep cultural insight for the learner. English speakers often default to this indirect framing. If you answer a request like that by genuinely considering the minding part, like saying, "Yes, I would actually mind because my hands are full," the interaction just hits this awkward wall.
Because you've violated the subtextual agreement, you've forced the speaker to acknowledge their polite phrasing was, in fact, a demand. It gets awkward.
Very. Okay, moving to the second function, we enter some tricky territory. Sarcasm or irony. This is where subtext isn't just softening the meaning, it's aggressively flipping it 180 degrees.
The text and the subtext are in complete opposition.
Total opposition. Consider the common situation of a colleague spilling an entire pot of fresh coffee all over the main server rack. Someone might walk by and deadpan, "Wow, just great job."
The words are positive, "great job," suggest excellent performance. But the context, the disaster, and that tone, it has to signal the cynical opposite meaning.
Sarcasm relies entirely on the listener understanding that the literal text is meaningless, and the true, scathing subtext is the only message that counts. That was a terrible, disastrous outcome.
Yeah. If a non-native speaker missed the cynical tone, they might genuinely think you're congratulating the colleague for their dramatic spill, and that would lead to total social confusion. Mastery of this subtext is often the final hurdle to truly sounding natural in English.
Our third function deals with the heavy stuff, concealed emotion. Subtext here serves as a protective mask when expressing intense feelings like sadness, fear, or anger is deemed risky, inappropriate, or just too difficult in the moment.
The classic example is the defensive denial. You approach a friend you know is struggling and they say, "I'm fine," but their eyes are puffy, their voice is tight, and they're holding themselves stiffly. That verbal denial is the text.
But the subtext is just screaming, "I am not fine. I am masking deep sadness or anger because I don't feel safe or ready to express it directly right now."
Or perhaps because I don't want to burden you. The text is the refusal to engage, but the subtext is the confession of pain. Learning to distinguish the genuine "I'm fine" from the concealed "I'm fine" is a vital social skill that goes beyond language.
Absolutely. Finally, we examine the use of subtext in social and power dynamics. This involves using indirect phrasing to convey an expectation or to reinforce a hierarchy without sounding overtly demanding or authoritarian.
The workplace is just full of this. Think of a senior leader who needs a report by the end of the day, but they want to maintain a collaborative atmosphere. They might say, "If you have time, could you please send me that report before you leave?"
The literal text implies choice, a consideration for the subordinate's schedule.
But the expectation, due to the power structure, is for prompt and absolute compliance. The subtextual agreement, the unspoken contract of the professional relationship. It just supersedes the literal meaning of the words.
So if the employee were to actually take their time and wait until tomorrow because the boss gave them an out, they might find themselves swiftly called into the boss's office for a very direct conversation about missed expectations. Reading that dynamic correctly is absolutely critical.
So we've established what subtext is and how it functions. Now let's move to the practical side of things. Why grasping this hidden layer is so pivotal for the learner. We're moving beyond just linguistic curiosity to practical results.
Yes, results that impact careers, relationships, even your mental well-being.
It truly is the difference between being merely functional in a language, getting by on basic literal commands, and being truly fluent and socially astute. It's the key to competence.
The sources lay out 5 key benefits that really illustrate the immediate return on investment for mastering subtext. Let's start with the most immediate one, improved communication.
When you grasp subtext, you're not just responding to what is said, but to what is meant. And that prevents these fundamental misunderstandings. If we go back to the chili statement, if you only take it literally, you might just shrug, confirm the temperature, and the speaker continues to sit there, freezing and, frankly, resentful.
Right. But by understanding the implied request, the subtext, you address the person's actual discomfort. This leads to a much fuller, more successful exchange. You're solving the human problem, not just the linguistic problem.
That deeper level of engagement lets you anticipate needs and intentions, making you a much more effective communicator.
The second benefit is, I think, the most profound. Relationship building. Sensitivity to subtext strengthens empathy. It just does. Because you are prioritizing the emotional reality of the speaker over their verbal facade. When you read the true emotions behind the words, you establish deep trust.
So if someone denies they are upset, but you notice the signs of stress, the crossed arms, the tightness in their voice, and you gently acknowledge it, maybe by saying, "You seem under a lot of pressure today. Is everything okay?" You're showing that you see them.
You see the unspoken truth.
Exactly. That sensitivity is an immediate indicator of high emotional intelligence. You're communicating, "I'm perceptive and I'm trustworthy." This ability accelerates connection and builds durable relationships, whether they're romantic, platonic, or professional, it says. I hear the music, not just the lyrics.
And that sensitivity connects directly to the third point, which is crucial for the global learner. Cultural navigation. Subtext is perhaps the greatest barrier to seamless cross-cultural interaction. It is a fundamental component of social grace, especially among native English speakers in places like the UK, the US, Canada.
Where indirect language is just so common. Many English-speaking societies favor soft, indirect communication styles, particularly when dealing with conflict or criticism. If you approach difficult conversations with aggressive, literal directness, even with perfect grammar, you'll often violate a deeply held social norm of politeness. Mastering subtext is mastering the culture.
The fourth benefit links back to those high-friction situations, conflict management. Recognizing hidden tensions or frustrations allows issues to be resolved or even averted before they escalate into full-blown arguments.
Subtext is really the early warning system for social conflict. If you can spot that rising resentment, the tone suddenly turning cold, the rapid blinking, the defensive posture, you can address the underlying issue gently. You're dealing with the pain before it becomes the anger.
Imagine a team member who consistently uses subtext to signal they feel overworked, they sigh heavily, they use the passive voice. If a manager ignores that subtext and waits for the person to explode, they've missed the opportunity for proactive resolution. Recognizing the subtext allows you to intervene before the resentment leads to burnout.
And finally, for anyone in a creative field or who just appreciates good stories, the fifth benefit is artistic and literary depth. I mean, the sources are crystal clear on this. Writers, screenwriters, actors, they must understand and use subtext to deliver believable, compelling nuance.
Oh, absolutely. The best movie dialogue, the most enduring novel scene, it's never about characters saying exactly what they think. If they did, it would be boring. It's about the massive, vibrating tension between what they say and what they feel.
And if a learner understands this dynamic, their consumption of literature and media instantly becomes richer. They move from simply following the plot to appreciating the psychological battle playing out beneath the words.
So if subtext isn't literally written down and it's not some secret code, how is it reliably communicated? How do we actually catch it?
Right, the mechanics of it. The sources show us that subtext is signaled simultaneously in multiple channels beyond the literal words. We should explore the 4 primary tools used to transmit that hidden meaning.
The first, and often the most visceral and powerful, is tone of voice. This is the non-lexical layer that accompanies the words. I like to think of it as the musical score that tells you whether the lyrics should be interpreted as a tragedy, a comedy, or a declaration of war.
Tone covers so much, doesn't it? Pitch, pace, volume, rhythm, inflection. It's fascinating because the literal words stay the same, but the meaning can shift dramatically.
Let's go back to our exercise. The phrase, well, that's just great.
Okay, so if you hear it with a high pitch, a quick pace, and an emphasis on the word just, well, that's just great. That often signifies genuine excitement.
Right, a positive surprise. But now, contrast that with a low, deadpan pitch, a slow pace, a descending intonation, stretching out the word great. Well, that's just gree.
And that instantly flips the meaning to exasperated disapproval or weary resignation. The tone carries the entire burden of the speaker's annoyance.
What's crucial is to listen not just to the tone, but to the change in tone. If someone's speaking normally and then suddenly their voice volume drops or their pace increases, that deviation itself is the subtextual flag.
Moving on, the second essential tool is body language. If tone is the auditory context, body language is the immediate visual verification or refutation of the words being spoken.
Yes, nonverbal cues, facial expressions, gestures, posture, they reveal true intentions and often contradict the spoken word because they're just harder to consciously control.
Think about the details. If someone's delivering uncomfortable news, you might see these small facial expressions they can't suppress, a micro frown, rapid eye movements, or even a sudden tensing of the neck muscles. Avoided eye contact signals discomfort or shame.
And posture is equally important. An open posture, arms unfolded, leaning slightly forward, relaxed shoulders, that typically provides warmth and confirms sincerity.
Conversely, if someone says they're interested in your idea but their arms are crossed and they're slightly leaning away from you, the subtext of defensiveness or disagreement is far stronger than their spoken words.
This is why that advice to watch a movie with the sound off is so valuable for the learner. You force yourself to decode meaning entirely through posture and gesture.
Our third tool is word choice and structure. This is the subtle linguistic artistry of how you phrase a message, which fundamentally changes its subtextual impact, even if the core facts are identical. It's all about managing the social risk.
Let's revisit the idea of criticism. We know a direct statement like, "You made a mistake on page 7, is aggressive.
So how do we introduce the subtext of politeness? We use linguistic buffers, or we change the structure.
Instead of the command, we might hear, "I wonder if we should take a closer look at the data on page 7, or using the passive voice. The data on page 7 seems to require additional verification.
And notice how those alternatives shift the focus. The original statement points the finger directly. You made the mistake. The revised versions introduce ambiguity. I wonder if we should. Implies collaboration and shared responsibility.
And the final tool is the invisible one, context, shared history or culture. This tool is often unseen but incredibly potent because it provides the interpretive framework. The established relationship between speakers shapes the subtextual weight of every single word.
This is why long-term friends or partners can communicate volumes with just a simple raised eyebrow or a look across a crowded room. They are leveraging years of shared context to convey an entire unsaid message that a newcomer would completely miss.
Similarly, cultural context determines whether a statement is a polite inquiry or a firm command. If you're in a high-power distance culture, a simple statement of fact from a senior person saying, "That timeline seems aggressive," carries a massive subtextual weight that someone from a more egalitarian culture might completely miss. Context is the filter.
So subtext isn't just one type of hidden meaning, it's an entire system. The sources categorize it by the layer of human interaction it comes from. Understanding these categories helps you zero in on the function of the hidden meaning.
Let's begin with the category that often causes the most personal confusion: emotional subtext. This happens when emotions are inappropriate, risky, or just too intense for the speaker to state directly. They're forced to leak out as nonverbal cues.
So a high-stakes discussion, maybe a performance review. The manager introduces an idea the employee finds completely unworkable. The employee, fearing conflict, carefully controls their words and says, "That's interesting, I hadn't considered that."
But the subtext is obvious. You see a sudden tightening of the jaw, maybe a brief flicker of resentment in the eyes, and a low, overly controlled voice. The text literally suggests engagement. The subtext likely translates to, "I deeply disagree with you, I feel cornered, and I want to avoid an argument."
Or what about the emotional subtext of passive resistance? We see that everywhere. A colleague is asked to help with a project they clearly resent. They sigh dramatically and say, "No, go ahead, I'm listening." But they say this with crossed arms, leaning back, and a cold, flat tone.
The verbal permission, the text, is attentive, but the nonverbal subtext is screaming defensiveness, resentment, or that they've already checked out. They're granting permission verbally while non-verbally blocking the communication entirely.
The second major category is social and cultural subtext. This is where deeply ingrained norms and tradition actively discourage directness, compelling speakers to rely on specific, culturally defined hints and codes.
And this is where we encounter the delightful puzzle of British understatement. When a British person says it's not bad in response to a Michelin star meal or a promotion they received, what's the actual meaning?
It certainly doesn't mean it's barely acceptable. It means culturally it is excellent, perhaps even profound. The subtext is a refusal to express high praise directly, preferring instead a modest, understated evaluation. The understatement itself is the measure of high value.
Similarly, we see American subtlety in criticism, which tends to rely heavily on positive framing, even when delivering negativity. A classic example is, "That's an interesting approach." If delivered with a neutral or slightly hesitant tone, the subtext signals underlying disapproval.
It's too polite to say that approach is fundamentally flawed and won't work. So they use this ambiguous, non-committal language that subtly implies a problem without owning the criticism directly. The subtext of interesting often means questionable, but I'm too polite to say so.
Our third category shifts to the highly tactical, workplace subtext. This is the constant use of indirect cues to preserve hierarchy, power structures, or just to make people feel better about having to do mandatory tasks.
Right, we go back to the managerial example. A manager says, "We might want to revisit this section before the client sees it." While it's phrased as a collaborative suggestion, the subtext coming from a manager is almost always a directive. It means, "This needs to be fixed. I expect you to rework it immediately."
The manager is using the subtext of collegiality to smooth over the actual function of the communication, which is command. Grasping this distinction is crucial for career progression.
Next, we have the realm of humor, irony, and sarcasm. These modes rely entirely on an implicit understanding that the words are not meant to be taken literally.
Take the common expression of dread. "Oh, fantastic, another meeting squeezed into my calendar." The literal text expresses enthusiastic approval, fantastic. But the context tells you the subtext conveys pure dread. The subtext is the joke.
Finally, let's consider flirting and romance. A huge amount of initial romantic communication is built on subtext, with hope and vulnerability disguised as casualness to mitigate the risk of rejection.
So if someone says, after a first date, "Maybe we'll see each other again sometime," coupled with lingering eye contact and a genuine smile, their text is non-committal. But the subtext is a clear and hopeful desire for future meeting. They're using subtext to test the waters without the massive emotional risk of a direct request.
Okay, to really internalize these concepts, we have to see them at work in complex, high-stakes scenarios. Subtext is the engine of all compelling human narrative.
And we begin with the great master of subtextual warfare, literature, specifically the unsaid courtship in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. This is a world where social rules are so rigid that direct, honest communication of feelings is almost impossible. Everything important is forced into the subtext.
In that era, you didn't just announce your love, it was negotiated through veiled language and careful gestures. Austen's genius is revealing the vast emotional chasm between what's permissible to say and what the characters actually feel.
The specific moment we have to analyze is Mr. Darcy's first proposal to Elizabeth. He says, "You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you."
If you strip away the subtext, it's a clear statement of affection, but the context is everything.
This confession of profound emotion is delivered in a shockingly arrogant way. He's emphasizing her inferiority and his sacrifice in proposing at all. The subtext is layered. "I know I'm behaving arrogantly, but my feelings are so intense I cannot control them."
And Elizabeth doesn't react to the text of admiration and love. She reacts to the subtext, the arrogance, the implied judgment of her family. The phrase, "you must allow me to tell you," is so formal, almost demanding her permission for him to speak. Their entire argument is a clash of subtexts.
Now let's examine film. Politeness is a threat. Film dialogue often leverages the cognitive dissonance between text and subtext to create intense drama, and no line does this better than a classic from The Godfather.
The line, delivered by Vito Corleone, "I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse." On the surface, it implies negotiation and choice. An offer is a diplomatic, business-like term.
But the film's context and the reputation of the speaker reveal the terrifying subtext. It's a chilling blend of threat and absolute certainty. The words are innocent, but the implicit meaning is coercive. He will accept because the alternative involves severe physical harm or death.
The dramatic power of the line is achieved precisely because the stated text is so far removed from the violent reality of the subtext. It's a textbook example of using indirect, polite language to wield absolute, non-negotiable power.
And finally, subtext plays out constantly in the ambiguity of everyday life. It's rarely singular or straightforward. This is what makes decoding so challenging, yet so rewarding.
Let's analyze the scenario provided. Two colleagues at a boring work party. Colleague A asks, "Staying much longer tonight?" Colleague B replies, "I might have one more drink."
So B's literal text is purely about their beverage plans, but the power of this response lies in the possibility for multiple subtexts existing at the same time.
Subtext A could be purely emotional. "I'm stalling because I'm trying to avoid going home." Maybe B is having relationship troubles. The party is a temporary emotional shield masked by the mention of a drink.
Subtext B could be relational, shifting the focus onto colleague A. "I'm waiting to see if you will stay too, because I find this party boring unless I have company." B is using the drink as a placeholder, measuring A's intent.
Subtext C could be professional. "I'm waiting for the CEO to leave because I don't want to look less committed than others." Here, the subtext is competitive professionalism.
The key takeaway is that subtext is often an intentional lack of commitment. The speaker is unable or unwilling to state a single direct meaning, forcing the listener to fill in the most likely contextual truth based on their history, tone, and body language.
We've established that reading between the lines is essential, but it is not easy. Especially for you, the learner, mastering a new language and culture, there are significant obstacles in picking up on that crucial nuance.
The primary hurdle we've touched on repeatedly is cultural differences. The subtextual codes are not universal. What is polite and tactful in one culture can be seen as evasive or even hostile in another.
So if a speaker comes from a culture that values extreme directness, they may interpret the American subtlety of "that's an interesting approach" as genuine interest, completely missing the subtext of disapproval. They walk away thinking their idea was a success.
Conversely, if a speaker comes from a high-context culture that values harmony, they may view a German colleague's simple, direct command, "we must do X," as incredibly rude because their cultural subtext dictates that all requests should be softened. The grammar is flawless, but the subtextual clash creates friction.
Individual styles matter immensely too. Even within a single culture, some people are just naturally blunt and direct. They prefer to avoid subtext entirely. Others rely heavily on it, finding direct confrontation awkward.
And, of course, the biggest hurdle for our primary audience is language learning itself. Non-native speakers often struggle to deploy or even notice nuance because they're focusing so much cognitive energy just on translation and grammar.
And all these challenges have been drastically compounded over the last 2 decades by technological mediation. When we communicate via text or email, we lose tone, cadence, and body language entirely, drastically increasing the risk of misinterpretation.
Navigating digital subtext requires an entirely new set of rules and vigilance. Since we can't see the furrowed brow or hear the exasperated sigh, we rely on digital cues that were never intended for such heavy communicative lifting: punctuation, capitalization, and emojis.
Let's spend a moment on the tyranny of the period. We noted the contrast, okay versus okay. The exclamation point tries to replace a warm, friendly tone.
But the simple period in a short reply now carries enormous unintended subtextual weight. In a casual, fast-paced digital chat, okay, suddenly feels terse, formal, potentially passive-aggressive, or even irritated. It imposes a feeling of finality or displeasure.
The period, intended as a neutral grammatical marker, has become a high-risk subtextual signal of mood.
Exactly. Similarly, the use of capitalization is fraught. Writing in all caps is universally read as shouting a subtext of urgency or aggression.
Emojis try to add nonverbal signals, but their interpretation varies wildly across individuals and generations. A simple thumbs up, while intended to be positive confirmation, can be read by some as condescending or dismissive.
Another crucial digital challenge is timing and response gaps. In spoken communication, a pause signals hesitation or thought. In digital communication, a long delay in reply carries heavy, often distressing subtext. It could signal disinterest, anger, or just that the person is very busy.
The ambiguity is the stressor. If you text a friend and they don't reply for 6 hours, the subtext you read into that is entirely based on your own anxiety. Are they ignoring me? Are they mad?
And finally, we confront generational codes. The subtextual meaning of digital signals is constantly evolving. Younger people may read thanks as incredibly formal or passive-aggressive because the formality feels unnatural in a casual chat. Meanwhile, older colleagues see proper grammar as normal courtesy.
The critical advice remains constant. Always know your audience. The subtext of a digital exchange lives entirely in the shared cultural code of the participants.
It's vital to acknowledge that subtext is not just a linguistic convenience. It is inherently a tool of power. We need to analyze how it functions in dynamics where hierarchy and negotiation are paramount.
Subtext is extremely powerful in leadership and negotiation because the act of using indirect language places the burden of interpretation on the receiver. Those with more power often expect others to expend the effort to read between the lines.
Let's deepen our leadership example. A leader saying, "Let's give this another look," is often a clear, non-negotiable directive. By phrasing it collaboratively, the leader avoids taking full accountability for declaring the work insufficient.
The leader uses indirectness to maintain a perception of collaboration while ensuring compliance. The subtextual message is, I am telling you to fix this, but I am doing it nicely so you don't feel criticized.
In negotiation and diplomacy, subtext often signals true boundaries and reveals hidden flexibility. When a seller says, "We are only flexible on price for a limited-time special offer," the text sounds firm and urgent.
But the subtext is usually, I am expecting you to negotiate heavily, but I need to start by presenting an illusion of firmness. The phrase, flexible on price, is a strategic invitation. It means clearly, start high, but there's definite room to bargain.
And this power dynamic exists even in the most intimate settings, like family friendship contexts. Consider a tired parent asking, "Should I do the dishes now?" That question may not be a practical offer.
In many cases, the subtext is purely emotional. It's a bid for appreciation, hoping the partner recognizes the effort being offered. If the partner just says, "Sure, thanks," the dishes get done. But the emotional subtext, the need for validation, was missed.
Now, this power inherent in subtext necessitates discussing the limits and ethics of subtext. While subtext allows for nuance and tact, excessive reliance on it can breed profound miscommunication or worse, manipulation.
Subtext allows people to avoid accountability. If you never say what you mean directly, you can always retreat to the literal text when challenged. I didn't say your idea was bad, I just said it was interesting. This deliberate ambiguity is manipulative.
This is why sometimes direct dialogue is absolutely necessary. It's required to avoid confusion when stakes are high discussing safety protocols or major financial decisions. Moreover, directness is essential to create safe, honest, relational spaces. Subtext can hide pain or hostility that requires direct address to be resolved.
The ethical challenge for the sophisticated communicator is balancing subtlety with necessary transparency. You must choose when to hint to preserve social grace and when to state clearly to preserve honesty.
Reading between the lines is a skill that can be developed. It's not innate talent, it's intentional observation and focused practice. For you, the learner, these are the actionable steps to start developing that subtext radar today.
The foundation of all subtextual skill is simple but deceptively difficult. Active listening. This means going beyond simply processing the words. You must train yourself to pay attention to all accompanying signals: tone, speed, pauses, body language, and context. The goal is to listen for what is not being said.
This leads directly to the next strategy. Tune into emotions. You have to ask yourself in real time, what is this person truly feeling and does it align with their words? The key is to look for dissonance.
Are they saying they're thrilled about the new project but their shoulders are slumped and their voice is flat? Are they annoyed but smiling? Noticing that fundamental mismatch between the verbal text and the physical subtext is the trigger for investigation. If the words and the music don't match, trust the music.
We must also observe context. This requires gathering all relevant information. What led up to this conversation? Are there established social rules shaping what people feel they can openly say? If you understand that frame, you can better decode the indirectness.
For example, if a colleague mentions they are swamped 2 weeks before a major deadline, the subtext might be a simple statement of fact. But if they mention they are swamped 3 times in a 15-minute conversation with their manager, the context suggests the subtext is an indirect request for help.
And if you are unsure about your interpretation, the safest and most effective tool is the gentle probe. Ask clarifying questions. This allows you to check your interpretation without forcing direct confrontation.
So if your colleague is hinting they want to reschedule, instead of saying, "Are you too tired to talk to me?" which is confrontational, use the gentle probe. "I notice you seem preoccupied, and I want to be respectful of your time. Did you mean you'd prefer to reschedule our chat?"
That phrase is brilliant because it uses language that promotes safety. I notice, validating the cue, I want to be respectful, preserving face, and then the question asks them to affirm the subtext without forcing them to admit they were dropping hints.
Finally, we encourage a wonderful practice activity called the Say It, Mean It game. This is a powerful self-reflection tool for building awareness.
The approach is simple. Force yourself to create a direct, literal version versus a subtle, subtextual version of the exact same request or emotion.
Let's take rejecting an invitation, the direct version. "I don't want to come to your party because I find your other friends irritating."
The subtextual, polite version. "Oh, that sounds lovely. I wish I could, but I have a scheduling conflict that evening. I'm so disappointed." By forcing yourself to do this translation, you develop an acute awareness of the linguistic choices used to cloak true meaning.
Another great practice is to watch short clips of film, pausing after a loaded line. Repeat what the character said, but then label 3 possible subtexts based on their tone and body language. This constant labeling accelerates your decoding skill.
Subtext reaches its most complex and arguably most essential level when English acts as a global bridge between different cultural styles. Navigating this intersection successfully is a hallmark of global fluency.
We must first clearly delineate the difference between direct versus indirect cultures. While American English often values a transactional directness, it still maintains layers of subtextual politeness in social exchanges.
Contrast that with British English, which tends toward greater understatement and nuance, making it one of the most subtext-heavy dialects. If a manager says, "I might suggest you reconsider the wording on that contract," they are not offering a suggestion.
That phrase, "I might suggest," is a firm correction in disguise. They are indicating that it must be changed, using softening, deferential language. The subtext is a command, the text is a consultation.
Now consider other global cultures. Many East Asian cultures use even more subtext, often driven by a need to preserve harmony and save face. In these contexts, saying no directly is often impolite. They might instead say, "That will be difficult," or "We will need to study that further."
For a Western learner, both of those phrases sound like a qualified yes. But the subtext is actually a firm, gentle no. The potential for missed subtext, where a firm denial is read as mere hesitation, is massive.
This brings us to navigating as a learner. When communicating in English across diverse backgrounds, misunderstandings often arise not from grammar errors, but from these seismic subtextual clashes.
The primary advice here is to promote awareness, curiosity, and humility. Assume you may not always have the full picture. When dealing with new cultural groups speaking English, start by watching and listening for patterns.
The path to mastery involves targeted observation. Watch films specific to the culture you are trying to understand to absorb the nonverbal cues. Practice mimicking the specific intonation and timing. Those subtle elements are packed with subtextual meaning.
And finally, never be afraid to gently ask for clarification when the stakes are high. Instead of asking, "Did you mean no?" Try. "To ensure I fully understand, could you confirm for me if this is a non-negotiable directive or if there is still room for discussion?" You are asking about the subtextual function of the statement, not its literal meaning.
So we've covered the entire spectrum of hidden meaning, from the high formality of Mr. Darcy's layered proposal to the curt, passive-aggressive period at the end of a modern text message.
Subtext is truly the underlying current of conversation, the dynamic heartbeat of human communication. It enables the profound nuance, the deep connection, the humor, and the essential social compassion that simple, literal language can never hope to achieve.
Mastering subtext is about evolving your understanding. It means understanding not just what people are saying, but who they are, what they value, what they fear, and what they secretly hope for. It fundamentally transforms your ability to connect.
This entire deep dive has been dedicated to giving you the tools to move beyond reading the words and toward reading the actual people behind them. We encourage you to apply these strategies immediately. Start noticing the tone, the posture, the telling pause.
The knowledge is yours. The sources leave us with a powerful challenge, one to carry forward into your next conversation, whether it's in person or over email.
The next time someone says, "That was interesting," listen closely. What do you hear beneath the surface? What's left unsaid? If you can train your ear for the music beneath the words, you'll understand not just English, but the universal Kamat's language of humanity itself.
That's a wrap on this deep dive. We look forward to exploring the next layer of complexity with you soon. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are getting into something that, well, it affects every single one of us. Every email, every text message, every single conversation. Just, look around you. If you're in a coffee shop, scrolling through your phone, or just hearing people talk at work, the English you're hearing it's alive.
It is. It's almost certainly not the version you memorized for a grammar test in 8th grade.
Exactly. And that's what this deep dive is all about. We're exploring a fundamental truth about language. English isn't some finished product sitting on a shelf.
No, it's an ongoing project. It's adaptive, it's playful, and honestly, it's a stubbornly human thing that just refuses to sit still.
That's our mission today. You have the grammarians, clutching their rule books, demanding that we follow these ancient laws. But natural, everyday English, it breaks those rules constantly.
I tell you, every day.
So we're going to explore why, not just the history, but the psychology, the sociology, and the technology that drives this constant evolution. It's this messy, beautiful dance between the rules and our creativity.
And let's be really clear right from the start. This isn't about celebrating, sloppiness. Some people are so quick to label any change as laziness.
Right. The language is deteriorating. You hear that all the time.
You do. But this is an invitation to see the science behind it. It's about how language reshapes itself almost in real time to reflect how we think, how we connect, and who we are. We're looking for the human story behind the syntax.
Okay, let's get into it. And I think we have to start with the big one, the myth of rigid grammar.
The foundation of it all.
We were all taught these ironclad rules. I can still hear them in my head. Never end a sentence with a preposition.
Don't split an infinitive.
Double negatives are always wrong. And these things, they just stick with you. They haunt you when you're writing an important email.
Well, they do. But what's so fascinating and what our research really brings to light is that most of these so-called eternal rules, they're actually pretty new.
New in what sense?
Well, most of them were formalized in the 17th and 18th centuries by grammarians, guys like Robert Louth, who weren't trying to describe how people spoke. They were trying to prescribe a more elegant version of English.
And their model for elegant was Latin, wasn't it? Which is a completely different kind of language.
A completely different beast. Latin is what we call a highly inflected language. The words change their endings to show their job in the sentence.
Subject, object, that sort of thing.
Exactly. English used to have a lot more of that, but we lost most of it centuries ago. But because Latin was the language of scholarship in the church, these grammarians thought English should be, forced into a Latin-shaped box.
So the rule about not ending a sentence with a preposition, that's a direct import from Latin grammar.
It is. In Latin, you just can't do it structurally. So they tried to impose that on English. It was an act of, cultural aspiration. It had nothing to do with how English naturally works.
And that's really the key insight for our whole discussion today, isn't it?
I think so. These rules were never voted on. They don't reflect how people actually communicate. Language isn't designed by a committee. It grows and flows and spills over any boundaries you try to build around it.
Which sets up this perfect tension. And that brings us to the two big ideas we need to work with. Prescriptive versus descriptive grammar.
Yes.
Can you just walk us through that divide? Because it really is the heart of everything we're talking about.
Absolutely. So prescriptive grammar is the rule book. It's the school teacher, the style guide. It tells you how language should be used to be correct.
So that's where you get things like use whom, not who, or being told you can't say ain't.
Exactly. It's a gatekeeper. It judges your language against a fixed standard.
Okay, so what's the other side of the coin?
The other side is descriptive grammar, and that's what professional linguists do. They study how people actually use language. A descriptive linguist doesn't see mistakes, they see patterns.
So if they hear someone say something like, he be working, they're not just marking it as wrong.
Not at all. They're asking, what does that mean? What is the system here? They see it as a meaningful expression that follows the rules of its own specific dialect.
And this is where it gets so interesting, because almost everything you learn in school is prescriptive, but the way you actually live your life, the way you talk and text, is completely descriptive. And that gap, that tension between the should and the is, that's where all the good stuff happens.
That's the engine of change.
All right, so let's unpack that. Our sources point to 4 main reasons why usage, in the end, always wins out over the rule book.
Yeah, these are sort of the 4 core drivers of linguistic change. Let's start with the one that's happening every second of every day. Efficiency.
Spoken language is just faster than rules can keep up.
It has to be.
Think about it. When you're talking to someone, ideas are they're bursting out. You're not stopping to diagram your sentences in your head.
You're definitely not checking for the subjunctive mood. You're just trying to get your meaning across as quickly as possible.
And to do that, you have to take shortcuts. We all do it.
All the time. You see it with dropped words. You don't ask, are you coming to the meeting? You say, you coming to the meeting.
Right. Or seen that movie instead of have you seen that movie? The context fills in the blanks.
Exactly. These ellipses, these shortcuts, they're not signs of being lazy. They're features of a highly efficient system designed for real-time interaction. I mean, if we all spoke in perfectly formed, grammatically complete sentences, conversations would just grind to a halt.
That's a great point. The so-called errors are actually what make conversation possible.
In many ways, yes. They are part of the natural fluidity of speech.
Okay, so the second driver is the history of the language itself. We often hear that English is a notorious thief.
Oh, it is. It's the biggest thief in the linguistic world. It has spent more than 1,000 years just grabbing words, structures, and idioms from everywhere.
Latin, French, Norse, German. The list is endless.
It is. And this is what gives English its incredible vocabulary, but it also creates total grammatical chaos. Because all these imported words and phrases, they bring their own rules or lack of rules with them.
And the old grammar rules just can't handle it.
We can't keep up. You see this perfectly with plurals. It's a total mess.
Right. Like cactus becomes cacti.
Right, following the Latin rule. But then virus becomes viruses, not viri. And circus becomes circuses, not circe. There's no consistent logic.
And then you get to a word like octopus. I feel like I've heard 3 different plurals for that.
You probably have. Because the word is from Greek, the technically correct plural would be octopodes.
Which nobody says.
Almost nobody. Then for a long time, people tried to apply the Latin rule, so they said octopi. But today, the most common accepted plural is just the regular English one, octopuses.
So usage just won out over all the historical correct options.
Usage always wins.
Yeah.
And it's not just words. We steal entire sentence structures.
Like long time no see.
The perfect example. Grammatically, that phrase is a train wreck. There's no subject, no verb. It breaks all the rules.
But everyone knows exactly what it means.
Everyone. And it's so efficient. It's a literal translation of a Chinese phrase that got absorbed into English because it just worked. It filled a need. And the language just trampled right over the existing rules to make room for it.
So when your language is built on borrowing, the grammar has to be flexible or it becomes irrelevant.
It has to adapt or it dies.
Which brings us to our third driver, and this one is so important. Social and regional dialects.
Yes. Community first, rules second.
Language isn't one single thing. You have New York English, Southern American English, multicultural London English.
And crucially for this discussion, African American Vernacular English, or AAVE.
And what might look like a mistake to an outsider is actually a very precise rule within that community's linguistic system.
Exactly. It's a signal of identity, of belonging. Let's dig into that AAVE example because it illustrates the point perfectly. Take the use of the verb be, but without conjugation. So a sentence like, he be working, to a speaker of what's called standard English, that sounds wrong.
Right, you'd expect he is working.
But in AAVE, he be working, has a very specific, powerful meaning that standard English struggles to express so concisely. It's what linguists call the habitual be.
Habitual meaning. It's something he does regularly.
Precisely. It doesn't mean he's working right this second. It means he has a job. He works consistently as a matter of routine. To get that same meaning in standard English, you'd have to say he works habitually or he is usually working.
So the supposed error is actually more efficient and more precise.
It's a brilliant linguistic tool, and that's why these dialectical forms persist. They serve the real complex needs of their speakers. They're about identity. Grammar is ultimately about belonging, not just about being correct.
Which perfectly sets up the fourth reason. What we see as mistakes today often just become the rules of tomorrow.
It's the circle of life for language. Every single change that is now accepted as standard started out as an error that someone, somewhere, complained about.
Let's go back to the split infinitive, the classic Star Trek line, to boldly go.
The banner of linguistic freedom. As we said, that rule was a clumsy attempt to make English behave like Latin. But in English, putting the adverb boldly right in the middle of the infinitive to go just works better.
It puts the emphasis exactly where you want it.
Exactly. If Captain Kirk had followed the old rule, he would have had to say, to go boldly, which just sounds clunky. less heroic.
It definitely does. The mistake is actually clearer and more powerful.
It is.
Huh.
And you see the exact same thing with ending sentences with prepositions.
Right. Who are you talking to is so much more natural than the ridiculously formal to whom are you talking.
It's the native natural flow of the language. The incorrect form won because it's simply better suited to how English works.
And even things we take for granted, like contractions, can't, won't, didn't.
Those were once considered far too informal for proper writing. They were seen as errors. But efficiency and common usage won out, and now they're completely standard. Yesterday's mistake is today's rule.
Okay, so that covers how real English breaks the rules. Let's shift a bit now and look at the actual linguistic science behind why this happens.
Right, let's go a bit deeper, beyond just usage, and into the mechanics of language change itself. The first and most fundamental scientific principle is that language change is simply inevitable.
A language that isn't changing is a dead language.
It is. I mean, just look at Old English, the language of Beowulf. That sounds like, wait, we gardina in Girdigum. It's functionally a different language. We can't understand it without translation.
And that proves that the language is always in motion. The rules we learn are just a snapshot of one specific moment in time.
A single frame in a very long movie. And sociolinguistics tells us what's driving that change today. You have constant contact with other languages through globalization and immigration.
You have technology creating totally new ways for us to communicate.
And you have social change. Every new generation reshapes the language. Youth culture, in particular, is a massive engine for linguistic innovation. They coin new words, they play with grammar, they're constantly pushing the language forward.
So trying to freeze the language, according to 18th century rules, is like trying to stop a river from flowing.
You just can't do it. The river's going to find a new path.
There's another fascinating force at play here, which is our brain's desire for simplicity. You call it regularization.
Yes, this is the natural human tendency to favor simple, predictable patterns. You see it most clearly in children learning to speak.
This is when a little kid will say something like, I go to the store instead of I went.
Exactly. They haven't memorized the irregular verb went. They've correctly identified the main rule for the past tense in English, ed, and they're applying it everywhere. It's called over-regularization.
It's their brain trying to make the language more logical and efficient.
It is. And over hundreds of years, that collective pressure from millions of speakers actually smooths out the language. Rarer, irregular forms tend to die off and get replaced by regular ones.
Is that what's happening with who and whom?
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
The distinction between the subject form who and the object form whom is an irregularity, and it's disappearing. Most people now just use who for everything in conversation because it's simpler. The language is regularizing itself, whether the rule book likes it or not.
Fascinating. So our mistakes are actually making the language easier to use.
In the long run, yes. It's a process of optimization.
Okay, let's talk about the unwritten rules. This is the field of pragmatics.
Yes, and this is where prescriptive grammar books really show their limitations, because they can't account for context, tone, or shared knowledge.
So grammar is about what's structurally correct, but pragmatics is about what's communicatively effective.
That's a great way to put it. Pragmatics is about reading between the lines. It governs things like implicature.
Implicature.
It's what you mean without saying it directly. For example, if I ask you, do you want to help me move this weekend? And you say, with a certain hesitation, maybe.
The literal meaning is it's possible, but the pragmatic meaning is absolutely not.
Exactly. The correct meaning has nothing to do with the dictionary definition and everything to do with tone, context, and our shared understanding of social cues. Prescriptive grammar has no way to account for that. A lot of rule breaking isn't for confusion. It's for politeness, for nuance, for smoothness.
Right. It's a higher level of communication that exists outside the formal rules.
And it's arguably the most important level.
This all moves us beyond syntax and into the cultural story. This is about language as identity and language as power.
Because the way we speak is deeply, deeply personal. Bending the rules, using slang, adopting a certain dialect, it's all part of how we stake out our identity.
You see it so clearly with teenagers.
Oh, absolutely. Teens are linguistic innovators. They create a shared slang and grammar for two reasons: to build solidarity within their group, and just as importantly, to exclude adults.
It's like a secret code.
It is. And the second an adult starts using their slang, the word is dead. It's not cool anymore. They have to invent something new. It's a constant cycle of creation.
And this isn't just about age. It's about culture. It's about place.
It is. A Southern drawl, a New York accent. These are badges of belonging. Even online, you see digital tribes with their own specific ways of communicating. Using hashtag grammar or certain memes signals that you're part of that community.
So when you try to enforce one single rigid standard, you're essentially telling people that their identity is invalid.
You risk erasing these incredibly rich and vibrant forms of self-expression. You're demanding conformity.
Which brings us to the dark side of this, grammar as a gatekeeping tool.
Yes, the power dynamics. For centuries, grammar has been used to decide who is educated, who sounds professional, and ultimately whose voice gets taken seriously.
And that unfairly targets people who speak non-mainstream dialects.
It does. It creates this false hierarchy where the correct way to speak just happens to be the way that the most powerful social and economic group speaks.
You mentioned before that Standard English is really just one dialect that got lucky.
It's a historical accident. The dialects spoken around London in the 15th and 16th centuries became dominant because that's where the government, the courts, and the money were.
And then the printing press came along.
And William Caxton set up his press in Westminster. So the London dialect got printed and distributed everywhere, cementing it as the standard. It had no inherent linguistic superiority, it just had better PR.
So when people break those standard rules, it's not just a mistake. In some ways, it's an act of resistance.
It's the sound of people refusing to be boxed in by someone else's idea of what is proper. It's an assertion of linguistic freedom.
Okay, let's get specific. I want to run through 5 of the most common mistakes that are actually systematic functional patterns.
The greatest hits of rule breaking. Let's do it.
Number 1, ending sentences with prepositions. We've touched on this, but let's really nail it down.
It's the classic example of a fake rule. It's unnatural in English. Think about a phrasal verb like look at. The preposition at is part of the verb's core meaning.
So trying to move it is like performing surgery on the sentence.
It is. At what are you looking? Sounds absurd. What are you looking at? Is clear, direct, and follows the natural rhythm of the language.
Okay, number 2, the double negative. The classic argument is that 2 negatives make a positive.
A purely mathematical argument that has nothing to do with how language works. In many, many dialects, this is a system called negative concord.
And what does that mean?
It means the negatives don't cancel. They reinforce, they intensify the negation. When someone says, I ain't never seen nothing like it, the meaning is crystal clear.
It's an emphatic no.
Exactly. It's a systematic rule for adding emphasis. And it's not some strange quirk. Languages like Spanish and Russian do the same thing. It's a totally valid grammatical system.
Got it. Number 3, the split infinitive. We know why the rule exists, but why is breaking it often better?
It's all about clarity. You want to place your adverb as close as possible to the verb it's modifying. By putting boldly between to and go, you make it 100% clear that boldly describes the act of going. Moving it can create ambiguity.
So the rule against splitting can actually make sentences less clear.
Often, yes. It's a rule that harms rather than helps English expression.
Okay, number 4, the word that everyone loves to hate, ain't.
Ain't. The stigma is purely social. Historically, ain't was a perfectly respectable contraction for am not, are not, and so on. It was used by the upper classes.
So what happened?
It became associated with lower socioeconomic groups, and the prescriptive gatekeepers declared it uneducated. We threw away a very useful, efficient word for reasons of pure classism.
But it's still widely used.
Because it's useful. It's a single, versatile negative contraction. Its utility is why it has survived all the prejudice against it.
And finally, number 5. The so-called filler words, like literally, just.
Right, the words that people complain make speakers sound unintelligent.
But the research shows they're actually doing a lot of work, right?
A ton of work. They are not empty noise. They are complex, pragmatic particles. Take like. It can be a hedge to soften a statement. It'll cost like $50. That signals an approximation.
And it's also used to introduce a quote.
The modern quotative. She was like, no way. It's a crucial piece of modern conversational grammar.
What about literally? That one drives people crazy when it's used to mean figuratively.
It does. But what's happening is that literally has evolved. It's now also used as an intensifier. It's a way to add strong emphasis. When someone says, I was literally dying of laughter, we all know they didn't actually medically expire.
The context makes the meaning clear.
The context is everything. Listeners are incredibly sophisticated at understanding this. These words aren't fillers. They're tools for signaling emotion, doubt, and emphasis. To ignore them is to ignore a huge part of how we communicate.
All of this evolution seems to have been put on hyperspeed by the internet.
Oh, absolutely. The digital revolution is the biggest accelerant of language change we've ever seen. It's taking these informal, spoken patterns and making them a dominant form of written communication.
Because platforms like Twitter and texting reward brevity above all else.
Speed is everything. So you see the rise of shortcuts like you for you, I don't know, and spoken forms like gonna and wanna are now completely normal in writing.
30 years ago, that would have been seen as a catastrophic failure of education.
And today, in a text message, it's a sign of digital fluency. It shows you understand the norms of the medium. The rules have been completely rewritten. What the classroom calls an error, the digital world calls being efficient.
And it's not just words. We have this whole new visual layer of communication.
Emojis, GIFs, memes. They've added a layer of nonverbal information that traditional grammar has no way to process.
What is an emoji, linguistically speaking?
It's a multi-tool. It can be punctuation, adding emotional tone to a sentence. It can replace a word entirely, like using the fire emoji to mean awesome.
And it provides the emotional cues that are missing from text.
Crucially, a simple smiley face at the end of the sentence can be the difference between a friendly comment and a harsh criticism. It's a pragmatic softener. We have built a new visual grammar to make our digital conversations work.
We also see so much deliberate playfulness online.
The stakes are low, so people get creative. You see intense repetition for emphasis. I am so tired.
Or using periods for dramatic effect. Everything.
It's all about rhythm and emphasis. And you see deliberate misspellings for cute or comedic effect like doggo or smole. Traditional grammarian would have a panic attack.
But it's a sign of a living, breathing, creative language.
It's humanity's endless capacity for invention on full display.
Okay, so we've spent this entire deep dive celebrating the breaking of rules, which leads to the big, inevitable question: does grammar even matter anymore?
It's the most important question. And the answer is yes, a resounding yes. But we have to rethink why it matters.
Its purpose isn't to be a tool for oppression, but a tool for clarity.
Exactly. And that clarity is most critical in formal, high-stakes situations. In a legal contract, an academic paper, a business report, you need a shared, standard set of rules so that there is zero ambiguity. Misunderstandings there have real costs.
So it's about knowing the rules so you can choose when to use them.
That is true mastery. Not just blindly following rules, but understanding them so well that you can make an informed choice about when to follow them for clarity and when to bend them for effect.
If you split an infinitive by accident, it's a mistake. If you do it on purpose for emphasis, it's a stylistic choice.
That's the difference. It's agency. It's skill.
And this all comes down to the power of context and what's known as code switching.
Yes, the ability to shift between different registers of language. This is probably the single most valuable linguistic skill a person can have today.
Because you don't talk to your boss the same way you text your best friend.
Of course not. You use formal, standard grammar in a job interview to show respect and competence. Then you switch to informal shortcuts and emojis on WhatsApp to show warmth. Then you might use highly specialized jargon in your online gaming community.
That ability to adapt is a sign of high linguistic intelligence.
It's a huge asset. It shows you are sensitive to your audience, your purpose, and your environment. It's so much more valuable than just rigidly sticking to one set of rules for every situation.
So in the end, it's really all about empathy.
I think so. It's about having the empathy to follow conventions when it shows respect for your audience, but also having the empathy to understand and celebrate the incredible richness and innovation in all the other ways English is spoken.
Respecting the standards, but also celebrating the change.
Exactly, because grammar at its heart is about one thing: connecting with other human beings.
So to wrap this all up, English doesn't break its own rules because of laziness.
Not at all. It breaks them because it has to.
Yeah.
It has to keep up with the messy, wonderful, constantly changing reality of the people who speak it. It has to evolve to express new ideas, new feelings, new identities.
Every time you hear a new word like hangry or adorkable or see a meme that pushes the boundaries of language,
You are witnessing evolution in action. Every mistake is an experiment. It's the language testing its own limits.
And here's the final thought we want to leave you with. A lot of these experiments, these errors that people complain about today, they will eventually become standard. Some might even become required.
That is the history of the language. The grammarians of the 18th century would be horrified by how we speak today, but we communicate with more people, more quickly, and in more ways than they could have ever imagined.
So the next time someone corrects you for splitting an infinitive or for using like, just smile.
You're not destroying the language, you're helping it grow.
Celebrate the full complexity, the creativity, and the charisma of natural English rules, bent, broken, and all. We hope this deep dive gave you a new way to think about the words you use every single day.